While I have built my own Sentinel, this custom Lego set by KO Customs partially inspired me to build my own. I was very tempted to buy this, but at the time it was a little expensive. Got to the point where I've kind of accepted the whole custom Lego realm, and I'm very excited to have been able to pick this up now. So let's get into the packaging. Just right off the bat, you can see a really nice render on the front with the Sentinel and a bunch of different characters that he's designed, whether they are custom minifigures that have come out or ones that haven't. It is nice to see them fully design all the characters instead of just having them being silhouettes or whatever. And this looks just like Lego packaging, so that's also a cool little detail. Side of the box is going to be a render of the Sentinel build with the KO logo, which will be continued on the other side, the exact same image. On the back though, you will get some play feature type pictures, little write-up about these using Lego elements, but not being a Lego set, obviously. And you can hook the feet onto a base plate with some parts, which I did with my design as well. And a cool thing that he did with his design is he used a light brick in the head. So it gives you an idea of posability, different play functions. So overall, this design for the packaging is very cool and is above and beyond for a custom Lego set. Very glad to see that. Let's go ahead and check out the content, where I'll just start off by saying that the box was nice and secure and very sturdy. Inside you'll get 5 numbered bags actually, which will make building so much more fun and will take out a lot of the pain of the building process. I know that's kind of a bummer when I design things and buy all the parts, it just ends up being mixed together. So great feature on them. That is really amazing them to do for the customers. And you'll get a saran wrapped instruction booklet as well that is printed. So that is a very premium feature for this build. The front is going to be just like the box, and you get some danger room pattern on the back. So that is very cool. I'll get this open quick. And again, just premium design for the instructions. Looks just like Lego. Has a very cool pattern on the back, and is going to be very easy to follow along with while you're building. And I am pumped to build this, so let's go ahead and get into the build. In bag 1, you end up building the feet. I had some slight frustration with this though in the instructions. I got to finishing the first one, and then it ended up being a ×2 on the instructions. I usually like to follow along and build both sets of a multiple quantity build, but the ×2 is only at the end, not at the beginning. So I saw that, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit, but obviously not a super huge deal. The end of the second bag ends up completing the legs. The first and second bag kind of blend together, with the first half of this part of the leg, I believe, being in bag 1, and then the second one is in bag 2. But the feet and then the knee pad sort of area, these are all mirrored. A lot of this is actually mirrored too for the thigh sort of area. But ball joints, go together to put the first part of the legs together, as you can see here. Do like the amount of greebling on these. That's nice. You can see that there are some Technic pins as well to connect the other parts of the leg. So you can see right now there is actually a pretty decent amount of height for this build. Just continuing the same process for the other leg. Sorry, the first one was a little off camera when I did it, but right there. Quick grabbing a minifigure I have by. It's going to be pretty tall, so I'm actually excited to see the final height for this because I'm liking what I'm seeing right now. Of course, you have a couple more parts, being these tubes that are going to connect to the back of the leg. I'll do that off camera quick. They were a bit tough to get on while they were fully assembled. I ended up taking off the top part there to slide them on, but that is a nice effect. I always thought that the legs were one of my favorite parts about this, seeing it online, and detailing on here is going to be cool. Since there are those extra parts now to articulate, it might add to some frustration when you're posing, since you have to adjust all the small parts to make it look a little more natural, but I think the extra detail is definitely worth it. Bag 3 ends up putting together the arms. The magenta parts are going to be completely identical. The hands are basically identical other than the thumb position. They're going to be on those basic ball joints. You just connect them together, and we'll toss that on the torso when that gets made. Bag 4 ends up being the head, which again is a magenta build. This is a non-Lego piece that they threw in there. They have another option too, which ends up being this painted part that is official Lego. And having them side by side, you can see that they are basically the exact same. So you could go either way if you want an official part, or if you're cool with the air quote bootleg part. like I am. I like the sheen on this, and it is nice that you don't have to worry about scraping paint off or anything like that. Top of that features the only printed part on the set, being the mouth there. Some nice black. And if you press on the back, there is a bit of a light up brick. Doesn't work super well, but it is kind of a fun little bit of a plea feature in this build. So that's cool to see. Some nice silver ink parts used for the face design as well. I feel like I might have wanted this to be a little bit more 3D. It ends up looking a little flat, but I'm sure after some modifications, you could probably spruce this up, but the size seems pretty good. Light feature is nice. You can see right there, I'm trying to press it, it doesn't work 100% of the time, and I'm sure that's just because of the brick sort of pressing in as you press it. Gonna happen. But the print is nice on that. And for bag 5, the final bag is where a lot of the pieces probably are, because this is a hefty build, being the actual body, just like the legs. Nice greebling with some tubing on the sides. Really like that part of the build. Has some of these flat parts for when the arms are going to go on, and the neck build there is pretty ingenious. Getting some of those like wire coil parts that are supposed to imply that the head is mechanically attached. Speaking of the head, let's just toss that on quick. Just gonna have a mix-hole joint on the bottom. Try to do it with one hand on camera, and looking pretty good if I do say so myself. It might look a little off when you're moving the head around, but if you get the angle just right for photos, I think that's gonna be a pretty cool effect right there. On the side of the torso, you can see a bit of a Technic beam on the side. There'll be one on both sides. And for that, it is just gonna be connecting the Technic pins into the side, getting them some cure, and just repeating the same process for the other side. Being a little careful not to pop some parts off. But before the build is done, you can see the exposed studs there, which are for these 2x4 tiles, just to cover up where the Technic beams are. One of those on both sides. And there we go. Finally done. And with those on is definitely where you're going to see the size of this build. It's got some height to it for sure. I'll compare it to my Sentinel when we get to the Danger Room later. But it is a very sizable build. The torso, like I said, hefty, lots of pieces, and adds a lot to the height as well. The legs are also pretty long. And that just leads us to the last parts of this build, being the arms, which are going to be on those classic ratchet joints. Trying to get this on camera might be a little harder than for you, but you just got to rotate them around a bit, get the arms natural. And that's looking pretty good. Like I said, the shoulder pads go up and down a bit, and as you move the arms, you can adjust them a bit, so that is nice for displaying. And like you saw, it's just been standing there. I didn't have to make any adjustments after putting all the parts on, so that's nice. You can see that it is pretty sturdy, even for it being a bit top heavy. But this was a pretty fun build. I'm glad that they sorted out the parts. Let's go ahead and toss this into my Danger Room build. To start off with a recap of the scales of the different Sentinels in my collection, we have my custom designed mock, the official Lego version here, which is very disappointing. I don't think anybody loved this one. Then the Ling sort of flashlight minifigure there, which makes it a little bit bigger, of course, keeps the proportions of a normal Lego minifigure, but isn't going to be big enough for me for my Sentinel, which is why happy I did end up building my own. I mentioned it a bit earlier, this was pretty much inspired by the KO Customs one to really push me to finally make my own design for this. Everyone's been kind of waiting for. Here is the KO Customs version of their Sentinel next to my custom one. Now you have to adjust the camera even because it is just that big. Some things to point out right now: magenta, dark pink, so colors vary here. And it's even too tall for the walls of the Danger Room. I'd have to make this whole build a little bit bigger, so I don't think I would have this in the Danger Room. And I was thinking, since the styles are different, articulation scheme is going to be different, I thought it would be kind of fun to turn this into master mold at some point. That would be my main idea, to use both of these in my collection in some way. And there's going to be pluses and minuses for both designs, obviously. I know mine isn't very sturdy. I've had no issues with KO's with that, since articulation is going to be a little bit more limited on this one, with the legs especially. I put mine on the ball joint so I could get in more dynamic poses. KO's is pretty much going to be at the minifigure articulation scheme, where the legs move back and forth a little bit with some give here and there, but you're not going to be able to move them from that straight up and down position, since there is no outward movement or pivot. Both hands kind of have the same sort of finger design. I definitely think I would want to upgrade this one to have my matching hands, since I really love the design I came up with there, and just gives it more articulation. This one would probably be pretty much what Lego is going to do. Obviously, I haven't seen the new one in person. Just want to get this video out. So I can have this, jump into the X-Mansion type videos. We'll go over everything there. I guess some design changes, or differences I should say, between our builds that I'm noticing right now is that the head on this one is a little bit on the big side, maybe matching the proportions of a minifigure head. On mine, I think the legs end up being a little too short, where the torso is huge, shorter legs. So I definitely have been buying parts to work on a version 2 of my design. That is something I definitely want to think about working on in the future. Don't have a deadline or anything like that, but a lot of good parts have been coming out in purple, but also just smaller ball joints, different ball joint parts. There are a lot more options, so kind of go back to the drawing board on that, make a better version. And while we're at it, I just want to point out on my face, I did actually switch out the parts on this now. It is light nougat instead of tan. So a couple upgrades there. And quick, before I move it out of the way, here's a lot more of a side-by-side comparison. Just see the height, there's like an extra 2 or 3 inches there. Very sizable build, very cool to have it. Let's go in more depth. At the head motion, the version of my build that I have has wires in it, so I don't have the full articulation, but it's on a ball joint. And I kind of pointed out, you know, pretty much full range since there isn't really anything hindering around the neck, since it is elevated as well. Light up feature is present, so like mine, I had to install the lights, but this one comes with the official Lego light brick. Definitely helps to give it a little bit of life. I'm sure you can figure out a way to jam it so the lights stay on for photos instead of having to hold it in. I do really like the magenta. That's what Lego went with their coloring as well. So the new official one will definitely fit in with this one aesthetic-wise. I think the body build for this is very good, very sturdy. It would be very fun to kind of modify, honestly. I'd love to see what I could do with the arms and legs to make it maybe a little bit more flexible and movable. I picked dark pink for my Sentinel design because there were more parts available. They went with the magenta because that is kind of more accurate to the 90s cartoon. So it's going to be a personal preference thing there color-wise, but the purple stayed the same. You know, that's classic Sentinels. Has the round sort of arc reactor there. And that is something that maybe I would change up. Again, with new parts coming out, you can probably do a lot more with this, with what they're putting out. I'm sure they were kind of limited. They made this like 2 or 3 years ago now, so options just weren't out there. I know there's like weird sort of triangular tile pieces, so I'd look into that maybe. But loving the weird little jetpack backpack thing they have on the back of theirs. I already kind of mentioned like the wired sort of coil tube pieces throughout are very fun. Shoulder pads being able to move out of the way was something I kind of looked at and added to my version as well. And arms for his are on those jointed parts like I already mentioned. Mine use ball joints so I can have more posability and action poses. But for this one as well as mine, you could probably switch these out for ball joints instead if you really wanted to. I mean, they already did use those ball joints for the sort of elbow pieces. So it's a Lego, customize it a bit if you wanted to. And as I mentioned, you know, you do have some hand articulation to get a minifigure in there if you want to. The thumb does have some pivot to it. Not a whole bunch, but it is there. And you could have an official minifigure. Of course, all of KO's custom minifigures would fit in as well. But adding a little bit of play there is nice and super necessary for a character like this, especially when you have it at the bigger scale. And with the over design too, even just the small little features like the decision to add the little Technic hole for different play functions is a really great design. Really excited to see that. And of course, they included the little tentacle that is seen throughout X-Men 97, of course, the original animated series. Some posability on that. A feature that Lego even included in the newest version that'll be with the X-Mansion. This would be having a little more posability where it'll actually hold its position, you know, ratchet each individual Technic thing to have it whatever way you want to, add more slots or pieces to give it more length. And of course, the idea is that you would wrap it up like that and it would allow you to toss in a minifigure. So very cool. Glad to see some more accurate detailing like that for the show, for the comics. This sort of thing happens all the time. So great little bit of translation there. I think the biggest crutch of this build is going to end up being the legs, which you build something huge like this, it's going to have a lot of weight. Not a lot you can do about it, but you can really only move the bottom of the leg very slightly, which is the biggest bummer. I'd have to look at that, but you add detail, and at a certain point, you can only do so much. And then when they add the coil pieces like this, there isn't a lot of give there. It's going to have to stay pretty consistently. Otherwise, you're bending it around, things will fall off. So you have to make cuts when you want aesthetic or function. And that was, again, something I struggled with. If you watch my Sentinel videos, there's not an easy way to use square-shaped bricks for the most part to give something a lot of posability, a lot of action. Parts are going to bump into each other since it's not an organic sort of flesh thing like a human. Because I really wanted a lot of articulation on mine, but you can only do so much, especially when it gets heavy. The feet on the bottom here, pointed out on the box, does have the same sort of Technic pin sort of setup that I put on mine a little bit. And you could do other things, put some flames on there. You have options, which is nice. It adds a little bit of extra security to the build if you're going to put it somewhere, especially in a mock. But I think the feet are also really nice. Pointed those out. You do have some sort of ankle pivot, which helps a little bit, but if the legs don't move out so much, you're not going to be able to do a whole bunch with them. There is a lot of flex to it though, so if you locked it down, kind of splayed the legs out, that would look kind of cool and would be a good option. And would probably be the easiest way to give it a little bit more of a dynamic stance. Even with the friction right now, I kind of place it in kind of a cool pose. So there's a little bit you can do with it. Style is more important to me, and if this is the design and the look he was going for, like, you got to go for it. And just for some last scaling things, I have the Sandman sort of mech style character there. Imagine if it had some legs, you know, it would be a little shorter than my Sentinel, but the scale on this is awesome. Really love to see the size. I mean, you're going to love putting your minifigures by this, displaying them all together. It's really cool to build somebody else's mock like this, especially one that I've put so many hours in on my own just to look them side by side, get inspiration. And I think this is definitely going to push me to improve this in different ways. I'm probably going to get rid of the sort of ab crunch on mine, since having a sturdier torso would just make it so much easier to actually pose. That's one of the hindrances for me. It's just, I didn't design that super well. And for me personally, I know looking at my mock, build like this is never done. I look at it all the time and I would change this, change that, but I am pretty happy with this. I'm sure Kyle, same sort of way, where you put something together, you get the final product out there. And especially for him, the build experience for this was just amazing. Having numbered instructions, numbered bags, it was pretty much like building a real Lego set, and the final product, just so cool. Especially for me, this is the first custom Lego set I've really built, especially at a size of this scale. Ton of love, ton of skill going into all of this. I'm very happy to have in my collection. If you want to see more Lego X-Men or custom Lego X-Men, check out all the videos on my channel. I have been Brick Radiop, and I will see you in the next video.